everybody, welcome to Caketastic Cakes. It's Jen and I'm going to show you how I put together this complete Minecraft cake. And if you see me use any tools or supplies that you can use, check the link in the description below. It should be able to help you out. Alright, I am starting with square cakes. I've got my cake, it's a 9-inch cake, and I'm just trimming off the edges because they were a little crusty, a little crooked, a little messy. Sticking it on my cake plate. I'm going to cover this in just some vanilla buttercream icing. This is just regular American crusting icing. I try to clean up the corners, as much as I can to try to make it as square as possible because Minecraft squares. And yeah, so I'm going to put a second smaller cake on it. I'm doing it into the corner there. I wanted to have kind of like a catty corner view of the cake, so when I'm stacking and icing it, I'm going with the idea that I'm going to be looking at it from the point forward, so it's more of a diagonal sitting cake. It's not going to sit with a flat side facing out. Now that I have my cake all iced, I am going to start making squares. This is fondant that I rolled out. It's got several different shades of green you're going to see. I've got some dark green, I've got some light green, I've got some beige, I've got some brown, I've got some copper, and I have a little bit of black because why not? Throw a little contrast in there, right? And now I'm going to start placing my squares. The squares, I believe, are just under half an inch in size. Now, as I'm placing them, I'm going to place 2 rows around the front on the sides, and I'm just placing them randomly. I'm trying to keep it, kind of mixed up with a little bit of a black thrown in here and there. Again, just for some contrast, a little more interesting to look at, that kind of thing. And you can see that the 2 squares don't go all the way to the top, and that's okay. Of course, in perfect world, it would be perfectly sized and everything, but in my world, not so much. I live in reality most of the time. Now I've got both of the sides there on the front, on the bottom, got the one side on the top there, and I'm just using my fondant smoother just to try to keep it a little flatter, try to keep it as neat and tidy and sharp as I can. So yes, my front view is looking pretty good. You can see I've got a little gap there on this side. This is the very back of the cake. So I'm not so worried about it, but I am going to take the time to, plaster it all up. I got the other side there too. And in the corners where it doesn't quite meet, I'm just filling it in. If you want to, cut one of those tiles in half, if you approach this situation, you could do that just to try to keep more of a sharp corner on that back corner. But it's the very back corner, and I wasn't losing too much sleep over it, honestly. So yes, okay, the sides of the cake are all covered up, and I know there's that little lip around the top. That's okay. Now I'm going to start with the green tiles. I have my 2 shades of green here. I don't have, a lot of shades, but if you wanted to make more, go right ahead. Same idea as before, I just start placing them. And I'm going to place them all over, and I'm starting from the inside of the cake and working my way to the outside. I had tried starting from the outer edge and going in, and it just didn't work right. It just didn't look right. So this is why I'm doing it this way. When they're tiles like this, you can pop them on and off, try whatever you want. This is just what ended up working best for me. So the sides, on the one side you can see, I can just stick the tile up and it matches up the edge and everything's fine. In the front, they have to bend a little bit until you start heading back, in which case they start to stand up, but I am trimming them a little shorter. This is just imperfections in my cake. With the icing on it, it just wasn't perfect, and I would recommend, honestly, like when I do this over again, I should say, I'm going to measure my cake and then trim it down so that it will be the appropriate size, and that way hopefully avoid some of this little, patchwork job I'm doing. For the top, you can see I put the tiles around the edge, and then I put the tiles on the top, but they did meet up with the edge, so it actually worked out okay. Just the bottom one in the front corner there gave me a little heartache. And again, I'm starting from that center point in the front and just working my way back, trying to keep my tiles as randomized as possible. There's that little edge again, the edge that is the bane of my Minecraft cake existence. And all I'm doing is cutting pieces of tile to make it fit and just plastering them in. Again, this is the very back side, so not too worried about it. I of course don't want any icing to show through. I want it to be as good as it can be. But the way I iced it, I guess the thickness is just a half of a tile off. And that little piece right there, that little gap right there, again, just fill it in with a little plug. Smooth it down as best you can. Try to make your edges nice and sharp. Just do the best you can, right? As long as it's all pixely looking and squared, I think it'll be okay. Now I decided to change it up a little bit, and I took some of the side tiles out of the green and I replaced them with half tiles of brown and half green, an entire tile of a beige, because you know, the levels in Minecraft are not perfectly green straight across. They are up and down and a little bit I guess uneven or stepped or whatever you want to say. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make it a little more authentic looking. So putting my little half tiles and stuff in there. And again, smooth it out. Try to keep it nice and neat. Try to keep the top nice and flat. And yeah, there you go. Okay, now getting into making the decorations for this bad boy. First, I'm going to show you real quick, just real quick, how I made the letters and the number for the Minecraft cake. I took some gray. This is fondant, or excuse me, gum paste, not fondant, not fondant. So it's going to dry and harden, hold its shape. You could use fondant if you add some Tylose powder to it. I have some big squares that I cut out. I want them to be more rectangular, so I'm just taking a little trim off of one side of all of them. And to make the Minecraft letters, you want everything to be pixelated looking. So I'm going to make a letter K right here. And I'm making those lines, those cuts are going to become basically like little steps you're going to see in order to create the legs of the letter K. So there you can kind of see that would be the two bottom parts of the K. This is going to be the center where the upper branch and the lower branch come out and go to the right. Go upper right and lower right. And again, it just makes steps. Just take little square cuts out of everything and it'll be perfect. There are a ton of templates out there online that you could Google if you want to follow them and be really true. However, I find that no child has ever gone back and been said to their parent that it didn't look right. Letters like the H, you know, just cut a little niche out of one of the sides just to make it a little more interesting looking. And that's it. That's all you got to do. As long as it's all pixelated looking, it's perfect. I like to put my letters and numbers on a black background. I feel like it just makes them stand out a little bit better. And it just gives a little bit more support. You don't have to do this part, of course, but I like how it looks. This part that I'm doing right now, though, I highly recommend you do. You should do. I'm using a food coloring marker, and I'm just creating some cracks in the rocks. So I'm just doing some, again, sharp right 90-degree angles. I'm making some steps. I'm making some things that look kind of like letter T's, just some straight lines coming out. But once you put it all together, it gives it a very craggly rock Minecraft look. All right, now I'm going to show you how I made the grass for the Minecraft. I have more of my gum paste, so it will dry and harden. I rolled it out pretty thin, but not too thin, and then I'm taking pieces of dried spaghetti, shoving it into the nice clean cut side of my grass there, and trimming off all the extra. So I cut it out, and it's now sitting on my dried spaghetti. It's basically rectangles. You're going to make a lot of green rectangles. I use dried spaghetti because I do not use toothpicks in my cakes. I do not use wires in my cakes. No child gets hurt eating one of my cakes. And the dried spaghetti will hold up and will sit nice and hard for you. So, you know, it is an alternative, a safe alternative. As you can see, I've got different sizes. I just got a whole bunch of them. I'm showing you this real quick, just this because you can see how I attach the decorations to a lollipop stick and it will allow it to stand. So once the decorations are hardened, I just put some water on some fresh gum paste, press it into a lollipop stick, add a little bit more water, press it carefully to the back, and there you go. Let it set up. You're good. Now I'm going to show you how I make the Minecraft figures. And the Steve and Creeper that I'm going to make are made using gum paste. And also, if you need any tools or supplies you see me using, check the link in the description below. It should be able to help you out. All right, I have been working with a couple pieces of wood, and I have a couple of stir sticks that I use that I got from like Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. And I use them to measure. I know some rolling pins come with the little, you know, rubber band things, but if you need something thick, I recommend finding yourself two good pieces of wood that are nice and clean that you could use. I have rolled out a nice big piece of beige that I cut out the square for the head and two rectangles for the arms. This one arm, I bent it, and because I bent it, it got all curvy, and since it's Minecraft, you want it to stay squared. So I trimmed off the sides to make it more angled. I have some light blue there that I rolled out. That I have a big square and then two smaller squares. The two smaller squares, as you can see, are the sleeves. I use a little piece of dried spaghetti to connect that arm to the sleeve. And I have another little piece of the same beige kind of color that I'm going to make a little letter T out of, a stocky letter T, to make the little, I guess the opening on the front of Steve's shirt there. I'm using a lollipop stick to hold everything together. I don't use toothpicks or wires if I can help it. And that's why I also use the spaghetti. And now I've stuck the head on. I'm connecting everything with a little bit of water. I had cut out another piece of rectangle of the beige for the one arm that I'm just having at his side. And now I'm going to cut out some legs here. So I have a long rectangle. It's not squared, it's actually rectangular here. And it's a little bit longer than the body, the torso up top. I split through the center as you saw there, but not all the way up. And I trimmed off the stick so just a little bit sticks down so it will connect into the legs, but it's not going to go, down between the legs. And now a little bit of water, and I'm going to connect him right on there. Now I'm going to lay him on his side, and I'm going to turn his legs. So now he's kind of like in a running or a walking position. And again, this is a little bit different than a lot of the Steves you're going to see out there. And this Steve, because of the way he is and the way his arms and legs are, he's going to take a couple days to make. You're going to have to let him have time to dry before you attach that other arm. So as you saw, I made a little like pair of steps for his shirt on his pants there. And this gray that's kind of on a thicker side is going to be his pickaxe. The pickaxe is pretty rough, I admit it. Not my best work, but I've never done it before and I was trying. So I basically cut out kind of like a big arrow and I kind of flattened off the ends, like I said, and then I started cutting little triangle wedges all around the whole darn thing as best I could in order to kind of create that blocked look, how it's like the little squares, but they're kind of sideways, so it's more jaggedy. So yeah, I went all around it as best I could, trying to make it look jaggedy. And then I took a black food coloring marker and just tried to kind of fill in those little jaggedies with more of a squared off shape in order to, make it look a little bit more like a pickaxe. Again, not my best work, I know, so do better than me. I'm going to attach it with a piece of dried spaghetti, so I ram that spaghetti right on up it, pretty much as far as it would go. And try to straighten out as much as I can and then shove it down into Steve's arm. Just make sure that your spaghetti doesn't come out the other side. I've got some brown gum paste rolled out really thin here. I stood him on his head so I could trace his head, and now I got the top of his hair. I'm going to do his little sideburns and the sides of his head now. It's a little bit shorter than the entire length of his head, and you just cut a little square out the side. It's going to be a little thinner at the top and thicker on the back side, so it kind of makes like a fat letter L basically from what we're seeing here. And then you need to do the same thing for the other side. Just match it up and it should be perfect, just like that. Now cover up the back of his head with just another square of gum paste, and then cut a long thin rectangle for the front for his bangs, or the front of his hair, whatever he's got going on there. Now this is a little out of focus, I apologize for this. It's just some white and blue that I cut into tiny little squares to make his eyes. So the white square goes on the outside, blue square on the inside, and then you have a rectangle that makes Steve's eyes. Just straighten them out with my knife blade there. Same thing for his mouth. There's a little rectangle for the brown for his mouth, two little squares, kind of catty corner on either side of his mouth, and now he's happy. There you go. Steve's a happy guy. All right, this is going to become his shoes, so it's just some dark gray gum paste. Going to do the same thing I did with his head, where I'm going to just set it down, trace it out, cut it out, and then stick it on with a little bit of water. What you do on the one side, going to do it on this same thing on the other side, and now he's got his shoes. Like, he looks pretty good, right? Okay, now I'm going to attach that arm. It's been a day, so it's had time to dry. I have a spaghetti in there. I put a little ball of fresh gum paste and some water, so it makes a good anchor. Squish it in place, and then his arm stays, and Steve is done, right? Not too shabby. Now, Creeper's even quicker. He's more basic. I'm going to use those sticks again to make a thick piece of green gum paste, and I cut out a square. I'm going to turn them on their sides. Fortunately, they're rectangles. They're not squares, so I can get different heights out of them. And I'm going to make the Creeper's body. It's smaller, it's thinner, And I'm going to run it down with my lollipop stick there, just like that. And then that does change the shape a little bit, so you might have to do some tweaking. When you're happy with it, stick the head on. Again, be careful you don't make the head come out the top, or the lollipop stick come out the top of his head. And now for the creeper, I'm going to put him in a styrofoam block. And this is how I'm going to do his legs. I've got more of the gum paste rolled out thin, or, medium, I guess. Cutting some nice thin rectangles out of it, and I'm going to bend his legs up. I want him to kind of be more of an action pose, as if his little legs are moving around and he's scooting around the screen or, or my cake. So again, just trim off the extra. It was kind of fat when I bent it and rounded it off, so I just, trimmed it to make it more squared. I have the one angle going there, so now it will go up against his body. I did it again at a little bit tighter of an angle, as you can see. This one's just going to be plain old rectangle, with just a couple little lines in the sides. So this is like if his leg was completely tucked up against his body, and everything is being attached with a little bit of water, and there you go. Right, so now he's like action pose. Yes, he's ready to go blow up all your hard work. This is going to be the creeper's face. I had started with a square, cut it kind of in half. I'm going to cut a couple little pieces there to make his eyes. I kind of make, I don't know, looks kind of like a mustache, but if it were a little bit more in focus, because I zoomed in on my footage so you could see a little better, but it's actually got the details for the two little sidebars and then the centerpiece. And put them on the face, make sure your eyes touch the corners. I'm using a green food color marker to make just some hash marks all over him, just so that it kind of, makes it look a little bit more pixelated because he's kind of plain. But when you're all done and then you have him, he looks pretty cool and he's ready to go on the cake. So yes, take your creeper. Once he's set up, you let him sit overnight so they get nice and firm. Take your Steve, take your creeper, put him on the cake. I used a little piece of lollipop stick in between Steve's legs just for him to lean on, so now he's kind of a freestanding guy. My other decorations had plenty of time to set up, so I'm putting the names on the cake. As you can see, I'm kind of staggering it around that central peak that I have going there. I also had some extra green tiles that I put around the edge of the cake, which I thought looked kind of cool on the cake plate there. Here come my pieces of grass, my little green rectangles. I'm putting them in clusters of like 3 or 4 and just sticking them here and there all over the place. And it's not a big deal, but it does kind of finish the look, give it a nice kind of finished touch to it. And once you have them all in place and you stand Steve back up because he was starting to get a little tippy there, you've got a super cool Minecraft cake that really is just a kind of a step above. You got your posed figures, got some extra greenery, looking sharp. So I hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe because it really does help me out. I've got a lot of other videos out there, so please take a look, and plenty of other Minecraft characters if you want to make different ones. And as always, thank you for watching Caketastic Cakes.